Evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, City Manager Bobkowitz, and City Clerk Green. This Sunday, April 22nd, is the 42nd annual celebration of Earth Day in the United States. And in our wonderful tradition of sustainability, Evanston has many wonderful activities planned. The city's official Earth Day and Arbor Day celebration will be this Saturday at the Ecology Center. 9 to noon will be cleanup at the Arboretum, and then followed by activities from 1 to 4. In addition to games and activities, there will also be the Evanston ETHS student-led jazz band, the Handsome Salamander, will be playing for your entertainment enjoyment. Also, earlier this week, the City and the Citizens Utility Board will be holding a press conference to announce at long last the winners of our Big Seven Savers contest, in which all of our largest employers have been competing to see who could rack up the largest power savings. That will be at 1:30 at the Ecology Center, where 2 households will win up to 1 year of free electricity from Citizens Utility Board. Also, a quick reminder that April is Cans for Cash Month, so we'll still have 2 more weeks to collect as many cans as we can get. And a full listing, there's about a half a dozen other activities that are also listed on the city's website. And finally, I'd like to introduce Ms. Deborah Poneman, who's an Evanston resident and a longtime friend of the Environmental Hall of Fame. As you may recall, Evanston was recommended by the Environmental Hall of Fame last year for a Sustainable Communities Award, and she's here tonight to give some information about another very exciting award and recognition that Evanston's receiving this evening.
Thank you. It is an honor to be here again, and it's also an honor to be a part of the Environmental Hall of Fame. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Environmental Hall of Fame, we are an organization, the goal of which is to empower, encourage, and reward individuals and communities for their efforts in terms of environmental sustainability. And I have been with the Environmental Hall of Fame since its inception. In 2008, we were in LA giving awards to the late Art Linkletter, to Van Jones, in 2009, we gave awards to Pierce and Keely Shea Brosnan, and Cappy Kidd, and also in 2009, Ed Begley Jr., but those are, in Harrison Ford, those are the fancy names, but we've also given awards to mayors in 30 different cities around the U.S. for their sustainability efforts, and I'm very proud to be a citizen of Evanston because it's unique that we honor a city 2 years in a row. But we are honoring Evanston once again, not because I live here, but because you deserve it, or we deserve it. And this year, we're giving the award not only to Mayor Tisdall and also the City Council, but the Evanston Environmental Association for the Green Living Festival. And we also wanted to say a special thanks to Catherine Hurley, wherever you went. Oh, there you are, who has been an incredible support, an incredible help, just absolutely delightful always to work with, and also just for her vision and as the sustainability coordinator for Evanston and the Green Living Festival, and also for connecting us with the members, because what we have done, as you came in, you saw these quilts in the room. Only one has been quilted, but our wonderful quilter, Teresa, has come from Hampshire, Illinois, to help us. But you see that there are numerous businesses in the greater Chicago area, many of which, and organizations, many of which are in Evanston, that we are rewarding for their sustainability efforts and honoring them by including them in these quilts that are going to be joined with other quilts from other areas around the country to create the largest calendar quilt in the world. It is already the largest. It's 66 feet long, and what's really exciting is that we have so many businesses in the Evanston area that are committed to sustainability that we are getting our own quilt. And it is going to be displayed around the world. This is a traveling exhibit, and each month represents a different area of sustainability. 1 month will be solar, 1 month will be green transportation, 1 month will be wind energy, 1 month will be climate initiatives, and all of the Evanston businesses that represent those areas will be honored by being included in that quilt. So without further ado, I'd like to invite up Alan Rubin, who is the founder of the Environmental Hall of Fame, and Mayor Tisdall to receive yet another award from the Environmental Hall of Fame. And by the way, go on our website and you'll see all of the great work that the Environmental Hall of Fame is doing. And Catherine, please come forward because you've been such a great part of everything that is happening in Evanston and all of the environmental initiatives. Should we come up there? Wherever you want. You're the boss. No, you're the boss.
That is an illusion.
So should we go over there? Okay.
And then afterwards you could all the exhibitors.
Yes. Oh, and the other thing is those businesses and organizations that are represented on the quilt, please stand up so we can acknowledge you for everything that you're doing. Taking photos of all of you by the quilt, hopefully with the mayor. First here? No, not here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I should ask while I'm near the microphone, Ricky Recycle just showed up. Ricky, would you come up so everyone could see? This is a marvelous volunteer.
Evanston, actually. But I'm proud to be here. I'm proud to be a part of this. I do a 1-hour zany high-energy comedy lecture teaching K through 6 everything about recycling. Thanks.
Thank you, Ricky. As city manager, while you're getting organized, I should announce the Mayor's Summer Youth Employment Program interviews are this Saturday, starting at 8 a.m. So any young people who have not already filled out an application, please come and do so and interview.
And that concludes presentations.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, City Clerk, do you have anything for us?
No, Madam Mayor.
All right, next is citizen comment. And on agenda items is Carl Bova and Donna Spacuzza.
Good evening, everybody. Carl Bova, 1322 Rosalie Street. And my comments are related to the new salt dome, which is agenda item SP3. I have to say that I'm going to agree wholeheartedly with staff in requesting that the City Council approve and proceed with the design and the construction of a new salt dome for several reasons. The chosen location is most appropriate and doesn't cost the city anything with respect to land acquisition. The cost of the project overall is very economical. The need for the salt dome has been well established, and there has been a significant amount of alternative locations examined in the course of coming to this recommendation. So on all of those scores, I would have to say, please approve and proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, there you are, Donna.
Hello, I'm Donna Spacuzza. I live at 229 Wesley, and I'm here to speak about the yellow line subway, although I would like to commend the report of the Homelessness Task Force, which I thought was excellent, and since I'm here, I thought I would support it. But basically, I just wanted to say that I thought the report on the yellow line was very informative and pretty well done, but I can't agree with the recommendation as it is now, and it is rather a personal issue in terms of the noise of construction and the stops and the increased traffic that would come simply because I was not convinced of the need for an additional station by attending the public meetings or reading the informational material. I didn't understand how the ridership estimates were derived, and the consultants did say they would do more explaining of it, but the estimate was 840 in 2010, and the draft ridership report says that they assumed that a large majority of riders would be current transit users diverted from other services, including buses. So to me, when I look at the expenditure for this type of thing, I see that there are buses that serve that line. It would be a great expense and would cause certainly some inconvenience to houses in the area in terms of traffic also, and possibly getting onto Asbury. And the survey that was done simply asked people which station they would prefer. They weren't given a choice of, do you want to see any, would you use any of them? Are you in favor of it? And I noticed that a lot of the comments in the survey, people did mention that. So I would just hope that the council, when they're looking at this, will try to get a better understanding of what kind of ridership will be generated. What is the benefit of having this additional station? Will it really increase a lot of ridership or just divert people from using the buses? And because of the difficulty that getting funding will have, I think federal sources will want to see increased ridership potential and development potential. And, I think many people would be opposed to any kind of residential assessment to help support that. So that's just my hope, that you will analyze more thoroughly and understand what the benefit would be in terms of this station. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Mike Vasilko, Padma Rao, and BK Rao.
Mike Vasilko, 2728 Reese Avenue, Evanston. Regarding the use of hands-free phones while driving, I just have a couple of additional brief comments. First, again, I appreciate the safety concerns about distracted drivers, but I just wanted to reiterate that hands-free phones use is really no more distracting than a host of other normal activities everyone does in a car while driving. More distracting than that are people who use these ear sets for iPods, for instance. Not only are they distracted by what they're listening to, but they're also far less likely to hear emergency vehicles. Further, there's the future of technology, which will transcend, I think, hands-free phones. I just wanted to pass out, circulate a newspaper clipping highlighting an experimental set of what they're called Google Glasses that allow users to see the host of icons in their peripheral vision, including voice commands, weather, maps, and calendars. My point is, you cannot pass enough ordinances to keep up with changes in technology. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Padma Rao, 2246 Sherman. My comments were approved by my attorney. We oppose this council's vote at Kendall to sentence over 24 trees to death and endanger pedestrians with an alley that dumps traffic onto the narrowest street. You ignored your legal duty to enforce the city code, which requires tree protection and traffic safety. You approved your first ward members' closed-door meetings with the developer, including the latest one she declared at your last meeting. The Evanston Patch reported that your first ward member told the developer's lawyer that your vote would be pushed through no matter what taxpayers say. Then you voted without addressing any taxpayer concerns. Isn't that arrogance? You did nothing to protect taxpayers' rights and funds in the face of double representation by Holland and Knight. When we asked why, your mayor, your lawyer, and your 8th Ward member attacked us. Did you ignore your duty to the taxpayers because your 1st Ward member's son works for that firm? Why else would you try to cover up this glaring conflict of interest? Isn't that corruption? You're trying to dismantle the township, which provides a safety net for our neediest neighbors. But today's agenda item SP1 is about homelessness, which the township is combating with general assistance and job training. What good is your lip service when you're trying to get rid of the township that's working to solve this problem? Isn't that hypocrisy? Your 8th Ward member made her animus against Veolia part of the public record in the video for your August 8, 2011 ANPW meeting. Why should taxpayers fund bullying, blustering buffoonery by public officials? At your last meeting, many of you giggled about this issue. What is funny about your tantrums costing taxpayers a lot of money? Isn't that contemptible? Your lawyer did nothing to stop your 8th Ward member's rant against Veolia. Wouldn't a competent lawyer protect the city by advising not to publicly express a predisposition towards prejudice that can be used against the city? The Daily Northwestern reported that your lawyer insisted on you claiming that a prank Twitter account was incontrovertible proof against the CAG, even though experts said that this lawyer's blunder could get the city's case thrown out. Wouldn't a competent lawyer know the difference between inadmissible hearsay and incontrovertible proof? Your lawyer admitted to a conflict of interest regarding the township, but continued to interfere. Your lawyer not only made excuses for your bad behavior, he joined in attacking taxpayers. Wouldn't a competent lawyer uphold the First Amendment instead of violating it? Wouldn't a lawyer in the private sector be fired for such a pattern of gross professional incompetence? Why are you wasting tax dollars on bad legal advice? Isn't that irresponsible? Protect the trees and pedestrians at Kendall as the city code requires. Respect the taxpayers and their rights. Isn't that your duty? See you all next time.
V.K. Rao, 2246 Sherman. My comments were approved by my attorney. We pointed out before, during, and after your vote on the Kendall project that it is detrimental to the safety of its neighbors. It is unsafe because of its unwise alley configuration. It is unsafe because of massive tree killing in a small area. Why didn't you consider any of the taxpayers' concerns? Why didn't you address the conflict of interest of Holland and Knight in this matter? According to the Evanston Patch, your first ward member assured the developer's lawyer that she had the votes for the project no matter what the taxpayers say. Your vote for the project without a word of discussion invites even more questions about your priorities or lack thereof when it comes to taxpayers' interests. How do your actions allegedly fulfill your duties to the taxpayers? The actions of your 8th Ward member not only invite questions, but her utterances invite something more serious. It is precisely her utterances that form the evidence used by Veolia in its lawsuit against the city. Giggling like an irresponsible child and then claiming old age as an excuse for allegedly not remembering her tirade against Veolia won't save the taxpayers from the expense of the resulting lawsuit. She doesn't have to stoop to invoking old age as an excuse for her lack of judgment. If any elderly person has a combination of both lack of judgment and lapse of memory, then shouldn't she resign from the public office instead of putting the city and its taxpayers at risk? Your lawyer's decisions to use inadmissible hearsay as incontrovertible proof against the CAG and to sit silent in what many people could conclude is acquiescence in a possible conspiracy to harm a lawful, legitimate business, while you made your animus against Veolia part of the public record, could probably cost the taxpayers a lot of money and make the city a laughingstock. Why should the taxpayers pay for your arrogance and your lawyers' incompetence? Finally, some advice from this taxpayer of advanced age to the rest of you elected and appointed ones. Joining the giggling club is not going to help anyone in any way. Doing the right thing is your absolute duty to the taxpayers. Saving the trees at Kendall is a good start, and it's easy. I shall return.
Thank you. That concludes citizen comment. City Manager, special order of business.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, we have several items this evening. The first is a report of the mayor's task force on homelessness. I believe there are co-chairs of that group. Ms. Singer, would you like to start, or Sue's going to start? Very good.
I'm Sue Calder, and I'm co-chair of the Task Force on Homelessness, and Karen Singer is my other co-chair, if you don't know her. I'd like to begin by thanking Mary Tisdale for establishing the task force to develop Evanston's plan to end homelessness, and the 22 members of the task force, many of whom are here, and would you raise your hands if you're here? Thank you.
You forgot to mention these are people who went to meetings at 7:30 in the morning.
For 14 months almost.
14 months. Don't leave that out.
I'd also like to thank our staff that supported us. They provided their time and lended their great expertise in developing our program, and one of them even provided donuts one day. So that was gratefully appreciated. To go to the overview, one of the startling things that we came up with is that 10% of Evanston's population is either at risk of homelessness or are homeless themselves. And these are people whose income is 30% of the area median income or less. The numbers probably are somewhat higher than in the past because HUD, the Housing and Urban Development Department of the U.S., has revised its definition of homelessness to include those who are doubled up. Our plan is not a new one. We are joining with over 240 other cities, counties, or states in having a plan to end homelessness. And we are also playing off of the Evanston's 2010 and 2014 consolidated plan. We have basically concluded that the thing that we'd like to move forward on is a housing first model. It's one that has been put in place throughout the country. It's relatively new, maybe 5 years old or so. And the philosophy behind it is that if you take homeless people and put them in a stable housing where they have a roof over their head and they've got a key to their front door, they can then are better enabled to deal with the issues that made them homeless. So that is, they may need case management for a short period of time or a longer period of time. Some don't need it at all. But basically, we move to a housing first model. Our recommendations and assumptions, we call for the community to work together. We have a great community. Many are doing a lot of things for homeless people. But we call for all of us to work together, the agencies, lay people, the business community, religious institutions, and the governments that impact Evanston. We'd like to recognize that there is a lot of work going on in the city with our 4 agencies that directly serve homeless people and the many other agencies that work on tangential issues that may lead to people who are homeless. The efforts that we're doing have to be supported, they have to be strengthened, and they have to be better coordinated than they are now. The other current it runs through all of our report is that we plan no additional cost to the city in terms of either financial resources or personnel resources. And we plan that this, what we're recommending would be a working commission. And I look back to my times on the Rules Committee when I was observing all those Rules committees, and I was amazed at what the Electrical Commission was doing. And they had so many projects. And I spoke to the chair afterwards, and he said, well, they kept raising their hands. They wanted to do it. And each of the people that are on that commission are taking on a number of these projects themselves. So now we'll turn to our one colorful slide, our homeless funnel. The funnel itself was developed in 2007 by a former professor of artificial intelligence at Northwestern. And he used a lot of statistics to kind of bring his first set of numbers together. We've used some other assumptions, but we are keeping his 5 levels of homelessness. The 2 blue ones represent 80% of the homeless, or they're the at-risk population of the 7,500 people that are at risk or actually homeless. We have to say that we are also making an assumption that these numbers may be low. The latest data that we've been able to use has been analyzed using the 2000 census, and those numbers may be somewhat low because the economy has gone down since then, and so we assume more people are being pushed into that funnel. Of the 80% who are at risk of homelessness, 3,500 to 4,500 persons are due to financial reasons. The consolidated plan identifies 4,300 plus households who are spending 50% or more of their income on housing costs. These are housing burdened people. And the accepted norm is that you would spend no more than 30% of your income on housing costs. These people are vulnerable in that if they have a serious illness, their car breaks down, and you know if your car breaks down, it can cost $200, it can cost $1,500 or more. They're going to pay their car bill because they need to get to work. And so they get behind in their mortgage or their rent or their utilities, and eventually they may face eviction. The consolidated plan also states that over 8,200 people live at or below poverty in Evanston. Those people also need to make choices, and they are at risk of being homeless. The second blue bubble accounts for 1,000 to 1,500 people, and those are due to social and personal factors. People leaving institutions, domestic violence account for some of that. When you say domestic violence, those people that are in those situations might leave at some point and might not have some place to go. 1/4 of women in our country face domestic violence at some point in their life. Another group we have is in 2011, in the first half of that of the year, 172 people had foreclosures. So let's now talk about the red bubbles, and those are the people who are actually at risk, are actually homeless. The doubled up, that's the new term, and these are 500 to 700 people, and you can call them doubled up or couch surfers. It's new to HUD, but not to the Department of Education, who recognized 5 or so years ago that this is a category, and they've imposed on the schools some special attention to these students. Currently, District 65 is working with 200 students who are doubled up. And if you assume they have at least one parent and perhaps some siblings, that number is going to grow. 202, in one meeting, Assistant Superintendent Hawthorne said that the high school was dealing with 50 to 75 people students that were homeless. And a later meeting, Dr. Witherspoon said 75 to 100, so I wasn't quite sure of the number. And I emailed Oscar last week, and on Wednesday there were 128 kids in 202 that were homeless. In addition to that doubled up population are adults who are living with friends, and HUD requires anyone who receives funding from them to do a point-in-time count during the last week of January. And when we did that in 2011, the last year we did it, there were 34 people on that one day that were living with friends or family and didn't really have their own home. They're at risk of homelessness because they don't know whether or not they're going to have to leave this afternoon or 2 weeks from now. It's just an unsure thing for them. If we project that number to a yearly number, we count about 190 of those people. Now we get to some real actual figures that we can document. In 2000, for about 7 years, we've had a homeless management information service in Evanston that's required by HUD. And in 2007 was the first year that we really had some hard numbers that were across all agencies that were participating. And so in 2011, Hilda's Place, which is the shelter that you think of first probably, had 110 people staying at it across the year. The YWCA had 259 women and children staying at it. Family Promise, a fairly new agency in Evanston, it's not an agency, it's a group of religious groups, work with families, and they had 31 people that they helped over the course of 2011. In addition, transitional housing. Transitional housing is housing that people can stay in for up to 2 years, and then they have to move on. So if they're stabilized, that's great, but two years is not always enough time. But Connections for the Homeless had 50 people in transitional shelter in 2011. And finally, the last group who are on the street is 500 to 700 people. And that, again, is documented through our HMIS system and entry point that Connections for the Homeless runs, and Interfaith Action of Evanston, which has a drop-in center, last year had 626 people that they worked with that were living on the street at some point during the year. And of those 626, 585 were receiving case management. That number has grown significantly. So going back to 2007, when we had our first actual measurement and accurate, we had 352 people that were living on the street, 250 of those getting case management. So we went from 352 to 626. Traditionally, the homeless people, about 60% have called Evanston their home. And if we multiply that times our 626, we have 375 people who count Evanston as their home living on the street at some point over the year. The funnel itself, people in the funnel, it's flexible. They may be at risk of homelessness for financial reasons and then get a better job and move out of it, or they may lose their job and go into homelessness. And over the course of a year or two, they may end up in a couple of those places. So it's a kind of a fluid thing, bouncing up and down, and that's our homeless funnel and our numbers. So I'm going to turn it over to Karen now.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Karen Singer, the co-chair of the task force, and it's been my privilege to be here tonight and to be co-chair of the task force for the last 15 months, even if it was 7:30 in the morning. So there are really two things we need to do if we're to work towards ending homelessness. Prevention, stopping people from entering the funnel in the first place, and rehousing. Rehousing those who are currently homeless and providing the supports they need to have a stable roof over their head. I really want to emphasize that Evanston does have a strong network of homeless services. However, it has not been enough, especially in the face of increasing numbers who are homeless and who are at risk of homelessness, a lack of affordable housing, and dramatically declining government support, especially in the areas of prevention. And if we focus on these two things, prevention and rehousing, we will begin to shift from managing homelessness to ending it. I want to just say a few more words about this Housing First strategy, because it really is an underlying component of these overarching strategies in everything we do. And I'm going to make one small correction. Housing First has been a best practice in this country dating back at least 10 years. It may be somewhat new to Evanston, but it is a best practice that has been in place at least a decade. And Housing First is an approach that provides housing as quickly as possible to people, and then the services to support them in that housing so that they can retain the housing. And it differs somewhat from how homelessness has been addressed in the past, which has really been a series of temporary housing, going from emergency shelter to transitional shelter and then into housing. In other words, being housing ready. And what we have found over the years is that this really doesn't work. It increases instability at a time when people need stability, and that if you can get people into housing quickly, the services and the supports will be far more effective for them to stay in that housing. Okay, so then the recommendations. The recommendations we are calling for really are proposing a collaborative effort from all sectors of the community working together to accomplish them. They'll lead to measurable goals using data-driven information to reduce the numbers of homeless and at risk of homelessness in our community over the next 5 years. They are to establish a Housing and Homeless Commission, to make housing affordable and develop more affordable housing for homeless people and those at risk of homelessness, to coordinate the community response for increased capacity and efficiency, to create more job opportunities and vocational training, to target existing resources toward proven strategies and leverage additional funding, and to educate and reach out to the community about the solutions to homelessness. The task force recognizes the city's difficult financial position at this point, and we really want to emphasize that the plan does not require additional city funding or additional staff time from the city. Rather, it calls for a retargeting of existing resources and a working together to leverage additional resources from the private sector and from state and other levels of government.
So let me briefly talk about recommendation 1 is to establish a Housing and Homeless Commission. The Housing Commission focuses on affordable housing, so it seems like it's a natural fit to work on homeless issues which so closely relate to affordable housing. We would like to see this as being data-driven, so we like to set annual targets and then benchmark those results with data collection. The data will show where Evanston is doing well, where there may be duplication, and where there are gaps. We would like to recommend that the commission be transparent and accountable and produce annual reports to the City Council and to the community at large. This is a community effort with the commission working to foster collaboration. And now we'll go to recommendation 2, make housing affordable and develop more affordable housing for homeless people and those at risk. This is, again, where the first one is to increase the number of rental subsidies. And this is one place where we might retarget some funding. We currently get housing rental subsidies from Section 8 of Cook County Housing Authority, but that waiting list is closed. It's a long wait if you're on the waiting list. So what we anticipate is we might retarget some of the current city resources for housing vouchers for Evanston residents. And it could be even further defined as targeting people who are the families in 202, or in 65 or 202. Increase the number of new and rehabbed affordable units for people who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. We're talking again about 30% of the AMI in terms of income. NSP2, which is a terrific program that the city received over $18 million from the stimulus funds, and that's been working to stabilize 2 neighborhoods in Evanston, 2 vulnerable neighborhoods, and it's been doing a good job at it. The second phase is the Emerson Square, and the problem with the program for us as homeless people, or working with homeless people, is that most of the units are not targeted to 30% of AMI. In fact, only 4 units are targeted for people that are with incomes of 30% of the AMI. The third goal is to increase supportive housing. Supportive housing assumes that there will be a financial support for the family so that they do not pay more than 30% of their income in housing-related costs, and it assumes that there would be case management. Again, the case management could be short-term until the family can manage it on its own. It might be just helping them get a new job or get more job training so that they can get a job. And it could be long-term, when people have some other social factors that they're dealing with and need more support for a longer period of time until they become stabilized. The third recommendation is to coordinate the community response for increased capacity and efficiency. Again, I go back to HMIS, in which the 4 agencies that are dealing with the homeless all participate, and people in the system are protected, their privacy is protected through HIPAA, which says that we work with individuals, but we do not reveal their names. But if we get people into HMIS, it allows us to see where the gaps are for the homeless, when they become stably housed, what types of housing are needed, and it would be great if we could expand the use of HMIS. The religious community, which started this whole awareness of homelessness in the city, is not participating, but I would bet that many ministers are still getting requests for help from their parishioners or others who walk in off the street. The schools, agencies who are working with homeless people but not directly on their homeless issues. They could all, if we could get more information into our HMIS, we'd be better able to deal with things. The second goal is to develop strategies to decrease the street population. The first area here is to explore shelters, and that's kind of an oxymoron with a housing first model. But if we look at our point-in-time count from 2011, we would actually see 80 people on the street that particular night. So how do we deal with these 80 people? What are we doing for them? The religious community is doing a fantastic job in having a soup kitchen every day of the week, and they provide warming centers during the winter months. Could those efforts be enhanced or remodeled to better serve the homeless population? I don't know, but it's something the commission could look at. We currently have no shelter for homeless youth in Evanston and no overnight shelter for families. So those are gaps that we have. Mainstream benefits. Accessing mainstream benefits to which the people are entitled, such as Social Security or food stamps, can often take months. There's training courses that have been developed that help case managers be able to work the system better and faster, and so that they get faster access to these benefits.
Excuse me, Alderman Burris has a question. Do you want to take questions now, or you want to wait till the end?
Fine.
You're reading this, and then you just commented on the no teen shelter in Evanston. Where is the closest teen shelter? It was just sort of alarming to me that
Living is down on the
the south side, and then there's some shelter in Park Ridge and out in Palatine.
Okay, so it's quite, and then you also mentioned the family, that there's none for families either. And
overnight shelter.
Right, so how long would it, City of Chicago as well?
Yeah, City of Chicago.
Would be closest.
Right.
Family Promise handles 4 families.
Okay. All right.
Transitional shelter, I believe, in Arlington Heights.
Okay, I was just thinking that's a really long distance. Thanks.
Okay. Focus on institutions. Develop unified policies and procedures of intake and discharge. Frequently, if someone is admitted through the emergency room, they're asked where their address is. A homeless person is very good at giving their mother's address or brother's address with no intention of going back to that location. So what we would like to do, and this is typical throughout Cook County because I've served on the discharge planning group for Cook County, is that we develop a series of questions that you don't accept the first answer to the question, but you delve a little bit deeper, and the people that deal with a homeless population know how to ask those questions, that you just keep getting at it. And the reason for this is then our hospitals do have social workers which help with discharge planning. If they could get started on that from the get-go, they'd be much better able to help these people and get them into some housing as they leave the hospitals. We also have people that are coming back from jails and prisons. The police department gets reports of who's coming back, but that's it. We don't know where they're going or where they're going if they have a place to stay. We know that they need help with getting a job and probably finding a place to stay. And for anyone that's been institutionalized for any number of years, as you can imagine, it's really difficult to start regaining the skills of daily, everyday life of how you manage for yourself. And finally, increased local and regional collaborations. Evanston is not an island. We're not alone in having our homeless population. And homelessness is actually now on the radar screen of our wealthier neighbors. And participation in regional collaborations is helping us find out what others are doing on how they're dealing with it and learn more ways to approach homelessness. We also have to work on the regional level for transportation and getting more jobs and being better able to get people from Evanston to those jobs. I volunteered at Hilda's Place a couple nights, and people have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to get to their job at Arlington Heights. This is not right.
Okay, recommendation 4 is to create more job opportunities and vocational training. Increasing employment opportunities and vocational training and coordinating existing programs is already a commitment made by the city and many other programs in Evanston. The city's economic plan calls for increased employment for Evanston residents through startups and workforce training. We could also look to ETHS, Oakton, Northwestern University, to help with these efforts. Additionally, one of Evanston's 150 top 10 goals is learn to work and work to learn, with plans to develop a vocational and co-op technical school to provide training and connections to employment in Evanston and the surrounding area. So these two goals really call for a coordination and an expansion of these efforts that are underway to identify the needs, the current resources, the gaps, and then really how we can work together to create additional opportunity for homeless people and those of risk at homelessness in Evanston. Recommendation 5, target existing resources towards proven strategies and leverage additional funding. There are currently different funding mechanisms at the federal, state, county, and local level that could be made available to serve this population, and this first goal really calls for a more in-depth look at what we have available and how we could better coordinate what we have available in a more holistic way that could meet our goals of ending homelessness. With a dramatic decrease in prevention funding from the state and federal government over the last 3 years and the end of the homeless prevention and rapid rehousing stimulus funding, we really have to get creative to generate additional funding streams to address the problem. So this second goal requires that we work together to leverage additional funding from all levels of government and really emphasizes private sources of funding as well. Recommendation 6, educate and reach out to the community about the solutions to homelessness. You know, as I was thinking about this recommendation, I really think that the mayor's task force was an excellent microcosm of what this recommendation and its goals are all about. We had approximately 25 people coming together from all different sectors of the community and with widely varying levels of understanding about the issue. And over the course of many months and through our collective learning, we were able to come together and realize what needed to happen to end homelessness. Homelessness is off the radar screen for a lot of people in Evanston, and yet we know that to work towards ending it, we have to get wider community buy-in and a collective will to do it. So this recommendation really involves putting together a much broader-based awareness and education campaign to let our fellow Evanstonians know the dimensions of the problem and what we propose together to work towards ending it. And last but not least, we must ensure this plan that, if adopted, does not gather dust on the shelf, but rather has a built-in mechanism for accountability to elected officials, to funders, the general public, and really demonstrates successes in moving towards these goals. So in conclusion, I just want to say this plan has been the result of many months of learning and understanding and thinking through how we can work together as a community to stop managing homelessness and work to end it. We realize it won't happen overnight, but we can go forward together with a coordinated and focused approach to turn this around. So I want to thank you for your attention, your time, and your commitment to this community issue. And I guess we'll open it for more questions if there are.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate your doing this. Do we have questions?
I do.
Alderman Fisk?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks to you and your committee. I'm Karen Singer's biggest fan for reasons. For reasons.
Are you going to tell them why?
It's on a different subject, but wonderful. And Kate, thank you for your time and conversation the other day. I'm curious. You've done such a thorough job in your report. Have other neighboring communities that you know of done the same?
Chicago has had one for close to 7-8 years now. Mm-hmm. That's Suburban Cook has a plan to end homelessness.
Okay, but are the surrounding communities, Wilmette, Winnetka?
No.
No, okay.
We take care of theirs.
Yeah, I know. And can you tell me what conversations, have you had any conversations with the university in terms of how the university might be able to help?
We have not had specific conversations, but actually Dan Lewis, who's here from Northwestern University and was on the task force, I'm sure has, and is an expert in homelessness as well, I'm sure has been talking to the university for years.
Do you want to come up so everyone can hear you?
Then you can be on TV.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Lewis. I'm a professor at Northwestern and the head of the Center for Civic Engagement there. I was asked by the president to serve on this task force, which I did as faithfully as I could. When the report came out, I shared it with upper administration people, and as far as I could tell, there was general support for what the task force has done. And I'm actually just personally already helping Mary Ellen with some student support this summer and next fall in order to get the called upon recommendations moving. So if there's other service that the university could do, I'd be happy to act as a conduit for that.
Thank you. Alderman Grover.
Hearty, grateful thanks to every member of the task force for their work and for a really superb report. I will move that we accept the report of the Mayor's Task Force on Homelessness called Heading Home, Working to End Homelessness, a 5-year plan for the City of Evanston. Is there a second? Second. My question is about the Housing First model. As we move into the Housing First model, do we have examples from other communities that have outcomes that show that a Housing First model is more effective than what we've been doing at Evanston, which is our best to manage homelessness?
Yes, we do. And I would ask Paul, who is actually Selden, as you know, is with Connections for the Homeless, and he's actually been employing a Housing First strategy for in this community for over 5 years, and in other communities where he's worked for almost 10 years. So he can speak to that.
Mr. Selden. Hello.
Good evening. Paul Selden. I'm the director of Connections. There are many studies been done of Housing First. And if you go to the HUD website, you'll find endless research on it. Most of the research is done primarily focusing on the so-called chronically homeless. Chronically homeless are people who've been living on the street at least for a year, usually have some kind of disabling condition, most often a mental illness or sometimes physical disability as well. And what they find is that it's this population, which represents about 10% of the overall population, and it costs communities in general about $50,000 a year per individual while they're on the street. And that when you put these people into permanent housing with support, over the first 2 years, while the overall costs remain more or less even because you're now paying for housing, which has a higher cost than obviously nothing on the street, but you've cut back on the amount of utilization of emergency rooms and hospitals, police and things of that sort. And then over succeeding years after the first 2 years, it continues to decline so that the overall cost for maintaining those individuals drops down to a fraction of what we currently spend on that population. And Housing First is what makes that happen. So that's what the studies show. And I'm happy to find some citations for them and distribute them.
My other question is the plan kind of proposes a 5-year timeline, and I guess my question to you, Ms. Singer, is that ambitious, or is that overly ambitious, or is it really underestimating what we can do?
I think it is ambitious, and I think it's a really important thing to be ambitious. It sets a high bar for us to really work hard and get there, and it is doable.
It's like ending polio.
That's
it
right.
Will happen.
They committed to it, and they did it. Right. So,
Alderman Rainey.
Madam Mayor, I want to thank the committee, and I want to point out that while my name is on the list, I contributed nothing and did not serve. So, just wanted to say that first. One of the things you stress is that homelessness can't be cured overnight, and it's going to take a while. And I'm wondering, since we have been dealing with this issue for much longer than overnight, since 84, 85, 86, how do we measure our successes?
I think that's an excellent question, and I think that's really, the task force spent quite a bit of time talking about how this plan has got to be data-driven. And I think that's, the commission will set benchmarks annually for what we hope to do, and will be held accountable for those benchmarks. And I think if we can really look to make this data-driven, we will be able to measure our successes.
One more thing. One of the great services, and as far as I'm concerned, the only significant service in addition to medical care that Evanston Township General Assistance and personal funds pay for is the housing support. For single people, it provides additional support that housing vouchers don't provide. People who receive general assistance are not eligible for housing vouchers or for Section 8. What I am wondering is, are people, this is a thing that I'm very confused about, are people who are in the shelter eligible for general assistance?
Since the shelter's connections
they are eligible for assistance if they had an address that they can demonstrate prior to moving into the shelter. Usually they've applied for it prior. So there are people who arrive at the shelter who have received it. One thing about the general assistance, it's really only $200, I think, for the housing. And there isn't.
But there's a lot of housing that serves, because I was the housing person at Neighbors at Work, and I know that general assistance housed many people while I was serving there.
Well, it definitely helps.
Yeah.
But it doesn't pay an entire
question is very
rent.
specific. I mean, we hear all the time that one of the great things that, that general assistance does is that it provides housing for people who are homeless. I'm surprised to hear you say that it's not clear cut. It's not clear cut. The people in the shelter have been there. What is the duration for people in the shelter?
Our average length of stay now is 78 days.
Right. So if you've been in the shelter 75 days, and before you moved into the shelter, even though at some point in time you lived in Evanston, you probably really aren't eligible for general assistance if your mom and dad or your sister and cousin and have not just thrown you out. I mean, there's probably a good chance you're not eligible for general assistance. So I think one of the really important things that we should do is, when the transition is made to the city providing services, if the township is dissolved, that we address that problem, and that we begin to recognize that one of the things that general assistance should do is serve the homeless.
I would love that.
Thank you. Alderman Holmes?
Well, I was just going to add that real special thanks to Mary Ellen and Sarah, who, under the leadership of Karen and Sue, provided us with lots and lots of models. So before we reached this first this model, we had looked at lots and lots, and it was a real educational process that we went through these last 14 months, and really very, very grateful for the opportunity to work with all of the community people that shared with us their views and their opinions. So well done. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Burris?
I didn't say before, but thank you. As many of you probably know, this is something that's near and dear to my heart. For family reasons, so I really appreciate everything you're doing. Mental health services in Evanston for homeless, where do people go? Who do you connect with? Who is your go-to agency, or is there such a thing? I mean, I have found it challenging to try to connect people that need mental health services that don't have resources in Evanston. So
I can speak at the YWCA. We use the Family Institute. We did use Metropolitan Family Services, although they're not here anymore. Paul Connections probably has a list of resources.
Well, you're absolutely right. It depends whether you're talking mental health, strictly mental health, or behavioral resources. We have peer services for some of the behavioral problems, but there's really nothing. We use mostly Chicago area services, C4 and Heartland. We keep hoping that the federally qualified healthcare facility will arrive here.
It may. We're working on it.
Right. Okay. When that, hopefully that will be a solution.
Alderman Braithwaite.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Also, thank you to the committee for the wonderful information. And I just wanted to respond to Alderman Burris and share with you there's a wonderful resource in the Second Ward. They're called Housing Options for the Mentally Ill. They're over on Florence Street. Really, really good resource. It's a small organization in the Second Ward, and I'll be more than happy to get you some information on that organization.
And they provide housing and services for mentally ill people.
Thank you. Seeing no further lights, I think you've answered all the questions, and now hopefully the community will band together and we will do the work you outlined. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it.
And Alderman Fisk, the bird season has started.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the report. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Madam Mayor, our second presentation is a report regarding the CTA Yellow Line Infill Station Engineering Feasibility Study. Suzette Robinson, our Director of Public Works, was here, and we'll go find her. Here she comes to make some initial comments. You have at your place some schematics and other drawings which will be referred to during the presentation. Ms. Robinson, are you going to provide some introductory comments? Either way is fine.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council, City Clerk. I'm Suzette Robinson, the Director of Public Works, and I'm really going to turn it over to the two of the primary people that did a lot of the work in preparing this feasibility study, and that is Rajiv Dahal and Tom. What's your last name? Coleman. Tom Coleman. Thank you very much. So if you guys could come up, are you going down there?
We can manage the lights.
Oh, you got lights. Sorry? Oh, the lights?
No. Rajiv Dal, Senior Traffic Engineer, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, Mr. City Clerk, Mr. City Manager. We have completed the Evanston Yellow Line Infill Station Engineering Feasibility Study and will present the findings tonight. I will briefly go over the background and the public process. Tom Coleman, the project manager for Parsons Brinckerhoff, will present the study details, including evaluation criteria, recommendation, and next steps. The line opened in March 1925 as Niles Center Branch. It operated until 1948. Between 1948 and 1963, there was some inter-urban service between Chicago and Milwaukee. Skokie Swift began operation in 1964 as a 2-year demonstration project, and it became the CTA Yellow Line in 1993. This current study is a continuation of a previous study. In 2007, travel market analysis had been completed. That analysis found that 3 locations, Ridge, Asbury, and Dodge, were viable locations for a station, and recommended that the engineering feasibility study be done to compare construction and cost issues in selecting a preferred location. After that, we received a $220,000 CMAQ grant to complete this study, and in 2010, Parsons Brinckerhoff was selected as the consulting engineers. At the onset of the study, 2 committees were formed. One was a technical committee. Representatives from CMAP, CTA, RTA, PACE, and IDOT were included. Their primary function was to review and provide input. Advisory committee also was formed to guide the study and help select a preferred location. It included aldermen, residents, the major employer in the area, St. Francis Hospital representative, and city staff. The advisory committee members include Alderman Rainey, Alderman Nguyen, Linda O'Dwyer from St. Francis Hospital. Linda, do you mind standing up? Yeah, Linda, do you mind standing up? Ben Shapiro, resident. Tom Kepler, resident. Director Robinson, Director Griffin, and Matt Swinkowski. The public process involves creating a project website. Then in June 2011, we had the first public meeting at the Levy Center to introduce the study and to receive initial feedback. The meeting was well attended, including the state representatives. After the meeting, we conducted a first online survey to find the travel modes of the respondents, their destination, and their preferred location. Then in September 2011, we held a second public meeting at St. Francis Hospital. Concept plans, preliminary engineering findings were presented and discussed. And that time, we also announced that Ridge Avenue location was being set aside, and Asbury and Dodge location would be evaluated further. After that, we did another online survey to find the interest between the two locations at Dodge and at Ridge. I'm sorry, not Ridge, Dodge and Asbury. Third and final public meeting was held early this year. The final findings of the study were presented, and we also announced that Asbury was the recommended preferred location. This slide shows the area where the responses we received from. A total of 454 responses were received. Of that, 95% was from Evanston, and of that 95%, 76% was from the 60202 zip code. Dodge and Oakton had the highest responses, 55. To the question if the respondents would use any one of these three locations, 73% of the 454 responses, which is about 331 responses, chose to answer this question, and more than a few selected more than one location. Ridge was selected 90 times, Asbury 137 times, and Dodge 228 times.
So people were allowed to select more than one?
Yes, the first survey, people were allowed to select more than one location. This slide is similar to the first slide. We received 426 responses. 85% was from Evanston, and of that, 67% from 60202 area code, zip code. And again, Dodge and Oakton area had the highest number of responses with 66. To the question, which station location do you prefer between Asbury and Dodge? Of the 426 responses, 126 or 30% picked Asbury, 249 picked Dodge, that's 58%, and 12% picked both locations. During the process, we also received 30 questions and comments by the 311 system, about 20 written comments, and almost 400 comments in conjunction with the surveys. So I'll turn it over to Tom Coleman, project manager for Parsons-Bickenhoff, and a Fifth Ward resident to present the rest of the findings.
Thank you, Rajiv. And again, I want to thank Alderman Nguyen and Alderman Rainey and the advisory committee for working with us the past year. Essentially, whoops, there we go. As everyone's well aware of South Evanston, our study area was pretty much bounded by Oakton on the north and by Howard Street on the south. Just to kind of quickly go over some of the activities in the study area, but essentially the first location, Ridge, is about 0.7 miles from the existing Howard station. That was one of the sites selected for review. That location was removed, as Rajiv said, at public meeting number 2. We'll get into that in a little more detail. Asbury is about one mile from the Howard station, and the Dodge station is about 1.5 miles. One of the perhaps, obviously, St. Francis Hospital, the various schools, Oakton School, the Target, Home Depot, as well as other activity centers, all located in the study area. These were more or less, the study area was defined as somewhat the area most people were to walk to and from the station, as well as employment around the stations. Project goals were developed coming out of the Evanston Multimodal Transportation Plan. These goals all were reviewed by the committee early in the process, but essentially these goals involve local access and mobility, provide and improve local access to the yellow line. As we all know, there is no current stop on the yellow line in Evanston. So the primary purpose of this study was to provide more access to that facility. Community and economic development, especially in relation to Howard Street. Regional and local transit system performance. Again, with any new station development in the region, the transit operators, CTA and PACE, would look at reevaluating bus routes and the existing service to feed any new station as well as existing stations. And also neighborhood cohesion. Early in this process, the advisory committee determined that this station should fit in context with the existing developed nature of the study area and not drastically change development patterns that have existed. The Ridge Station, essentially, a lot of the information about the Ridge Station came out of the first online survey in respect to public comments. One of the interesting factors of the study area, as perhaps you're aware, it's a higher population density towards Ridge and lower, almost half as lower density as you get towards Dodge. So there's significantly more people living in Ridge around that area. Primarily, there was concern over the traffic on Ridge, and would adding a station there increase traffic congestion and other traffic-related issues. Also, the land use around Ridge is pretty much developed with multifamily, older multifamily apartment buildings and single-family homes in that area. The historic district, several of the comments in the public meetings and the online survey, people referred to impacts related to the historic district, mainly increased traffic in that district and other associated impacts. Asbury Avenue is located almost on exactly on the other side of that historic district. And again, the population in this area is slightly less than Ridge. But other notable feature of Asbury is it's still within pretty much a half-mile walking radius distance to St. Francis Hospital. Just a quick summary of this. For each station, there were, as part of the engineering feasibility component of the study, the consultant team looked at the CTA design requirements in order to determine under the CTA requirements, could you put a station here and could you meet the requirements set forth by the CTA. In all cases at Ridge, Asbury, Dodge, this was determined feasible. So the selection of these stations really came down to the context of the neighborhood and the impacts around it. Also at Asbury, because Asbury is actually located below street grade in a trench, the existing yellow line is a trench, there were some issues related to a second access to that platform, because you would essentially leave the Asbury Bridge, go into a station house, go down into the trench. Many CTA stations under development regulations and under the fire code have a secondary means of egress, usually at the end of the station. This was analyzed in the study, and some of that information is in the report. The Asbury Station House, as I explained, it would be at street level, and as you can see from the architect's rendering here, because of the existing context of Asbury, because of the existing trees and vegetation, as well as the multi-family buildings around it, you can't really tell. There's obviously a rail line there because it's going under the street and is running kind of west behind the station there. There is enough room on. One of the issues related to Ridge is the right-of-way of Ridge Road is actually narrower than Asbury. The Asbury Bridge is a little wider, meaning that you could actually accommodate a bus pull-off in the area by Asbury and have vehicles still pass around in a traffic lane. This is an architect's rendering of the what the platform would look like when you're in the trench. Again, because you're down below grade, you don't necessarily see the surrounding buildings around. Another benefit of this trench location, there was a noise and vibration analysis impact done for each station option, and the station obviously being located below grade provides some screening to those impacts. Dodge Avenue is somewhat very different characteristically from the Asbury location, primarily because in this area, the yellow line is elevated above the street. Now, in all these cases, there were stations at these locations up until the 1940s when the North Shore line was shut down. At that time, those stations were more or less in the same locations as we're looking at stations today. Now, what has changed today is primarily different requirements to station design and also meeting accessibility requirements for stations. This issue was more relevant at Dodge because of the existing structure of the bridge that is nearly about 85 years old and such was built to accommodate that previous station. And part of the analysis that we went through in this study showed that that bridge would have to be replaced today to support a new station. And accompanying that was also a new track work and other work related to the berm to support that. Now, Dodge also has a much less population surrounding it, mainly because of the character of the land use. Most of the houses are single family, but you also have James Park up in the northwest corner. Again, two options were looked at the Dodge station. One, what we call a center track platform, meaning putting the platform between the two tracks or on the side of the tracks. And these types of stations are prevalent all over the CTA system, but the main impact is if you can have a center platform, you can reduce your capital costs because of the associated expense with elevators, stairs, and other facilities. It was determined at the same time the Ridge station was eliminated in this fall that we would continue to only look at the Dodge center platform option as part of the detailed analysis. and similar to all the other stations, a set of conceptual design plans according to CTA station requirements was laid out. Again, the architect's rendering, again, the character is very different from Asbury as the station is elevated. In the next step after that second public meeting, we went into a second higher level of detailed evaluation where we mainly looked at the physical characteristics, the public support, mainly from the first online survey and the second online survey that Rajiv mentioned, as well as socioeconomic factors, environmental factors, in particular potential noise and vibration impacts, transportation factors, mainly being transit connectivity, as well as traffic roadway impacts, capital cost, operating cost, and the ridership potential. To kind of briefly summarize the results of that, the Asbury station, as I mentioned before, can be accommodated below grade. The Dodge station is elevated. Visual and noise impacts are mitigated by the trench. In the Dodge station, you would have to design facilities related to the bridge or the station in order to mitigate those noise impacts with noise panels or other items. We went through, in order to work with the advisory committee, we worked over a series of meetings to develop a rating criteria to help us understand the impacts and present that information to the public in the public meeting. Essentially what this chart shows is somewhat of a very simplified way to understand it, but Asbury got a plus in physical characteristics, mainly to the lower cost, capital cost of putting in the Asbury station compared to the Dodge. But on the converse, as we all saw from the public comments, Dodge received more favorable comments in the public survey. So the nature of these evaluation criteria is they balance themselves and they come out with a summary rating and a recommendation at the end. Again, this is a tool that was used by the advisory committee and to help understand the project. Our preliminary findings for Asbury, essentially if we go back and look at our project goals and related to our project goals, local access and mobility, over 11,000 population can be served within a half-mile walking distance of the station. And again, one of the things we looked at in the ridership analysis, which was conducted in this, was an estimate primarily focused on accessibility of walking. It was determined early in this process that these stations, we did not want to create a drive, essentially an activity center where people would drive to the station, because that would require additional impact as well as space for parking and other impacts to the neighborhood. Asbury had a slightly increased ridership potential in that estimate over Dodge, mainly because of the higher population within that walking distance. Community and economic development, both of these sites all three of these sites were looked at in terms of potential if they could support future development. The advisory committee came to the conclusion that, in particular, the Asbury Western Howard corner of that area could be influenced by potential development in the future if this station was implemented, but also along with CTA projects that is looking at increased service along Western Avenue. Other benefits is the potential to increase development or density between the station and that Asbury or Western and Howard intersection. Regional and local transit, as I said before, the whereas the Ridge Station is kind of still within walking distance of the South Street Station and the Howard Station. The Asbury Station felt more in compliant with current standards for CTA separation between stations. Asbury, although the bus service on Asbury right now is not full-time, it's only in the peaks in different directions. If this station was improved, that Asbury corridor could be a future, would be studied by CTA in the future for increasing the level of bus service or connectivity to that station. Again, in the ridership analysis, the type of analysis that was taken into consideration was the diversion from these bus lines or existing stations to this new station. And neighborhood cohesion. Essentially, the conclusions of the advisory committee were that at Asbury, these impacts could be mitigated more cost effectively at Asbury than they could be at Dodge. And again, I wanted to emphasize that these stations were all considered neighborhood type stations with no facility for commuter parking or the purchase of additional right-of-way outside of the CTA right-of-way to provide that station. Again, to summarize the findings of the study, the Asbury Station, the estimated cost is about $23 million. When you break that number down, about $16 million is the actual construction cost of that station, and the remainder of the funds is to conduct the engineering studies and design studies to lead up to that construction. The estimated 2010 was about 840 boardings per day. Using an annualization factor that CTA provides, that's about 263,000 boardings per year. That's just that's just one person getting on a train. It doesn't count the return trip because CTA doesn't count its boardings in that way because they don't track people leaving a train. But essentially, this number 840 was within the range that was looked at earlier by the Travel Market Survey, as well as independently in a study the CTA did for these stations also. Again, the next steps of the study is somewhat focused on how you increase the potential for that ridership. If we look at the cost and what is the next thing to occur, this study was a feasibility study. The main purpose to determine the location being Asbury. The next step is to do an IDOT Phase 1 preliminary engineering and environmental study. In that environmental study, you would go through the steps to determine if a categorical exclusion or an environmental document needs to be produced and have the associated meetings and process under the Federal National Environmental Policy Act to review that station. That would take approximately 1 to 2 years. We estimated that cost anywhere between the range of $1 million to $1.6 million based upon the construction cost. The next phase is a design phase where the actual construction plans are developed based on the preliminary engineering. Again, that phase 2 is typically shorter in length than phase 1 and builds upon the existing data in the study.
Excuse me, sure. Alderman Rainey has a question.
Tom, I'm sitting here looking at my colleagues, and I know what's going through their head. How long is this going to take, and how much is it going to cost, and et cetera, et cetera. So I'm wondering, as you go, I mean, we're into the different phases, but I think it would be helpful if, for example, at phase 2, you give us some idea of where that money would come from. Sure. As we're talking about
that would be so nice if I knew where the money was.
And how long you think it would take us to even get to phase 2.
Yes. And that's kind of there's a slide coming up after here
I know,
where all
but
this
we
is
might
at.
forget that you said phase 2, 1 to 2 years approximately. Okay, all right. I just wanted to.
Yeah. Now, assuming you have your funding requirements all in a row, you could, starting today, the earliest you could probably come in line with this station is 2016 or 18, 6 to 8 years, which is probably the shortest amount of time. Otherwise, that schedule just gets lengthens as in relation to your funding. This may be a little hard to see on the screen, but essentially in the report, what we provided was the types of funding programs that you would need to go through to fund that phase 1, 2, and 3. Essentially, in this region, the primary source of funding is the Congestion Management Air Quality Funds, which this project was early in this process. At that time, the city engineer, Paul Schneider, put in an application to potentially fund the phase 1. That was not successful at that time. But under working with CMAQ, you would essentially, that's perhaps the most promising area to look at funding for these phases. Other programs are related to the programs administered by the Federal Transit Administration for under either the New Starts program or other programs to fund a station. Essentially, in order to go through this development process, you need to do that phase 1 step before you can do phase 2 and obviously 3. You can't go into phase 2 unless you get a clearance and recommendation on your phase 1 study. And perhaps if there's any, I think this is the last slide before I summarize, but if you have a specific question.
I don't see any lights
Okay.
on for specific questions. Oh, we do have one. Alderman Wilson.
I guess 2 questions. One, I noticed that there was a somewhat significant differential in the operating and maintenance costs. Is there anything that accounts for that?
Yes, essentially both those operation and maintenance is used by a cost factor that CTA develops. They come up with it based upon all their facilities. They have an actual unit cost for operating and maintenance of station. That number is driven by the number of users of that station. So one unusual outcome of that relationship is if you have more users of a station, you have higher operating and maintenance cost. So that's not necessarily a negative per se.
And I'm pretty much 100% sure I know the answer to this question, but does the CTA have any sort of policy or procedure that would allow a local government to recapture investment in a station?
Yes, well, the most recent examples is the Clybourne station, the Apple, the development agreement that allowed Apple to pay for the modernization of that station, as well as the Oakton station, which is under development now. There are certain items that Skokie and the CTA resolved or negotiated over the implementation of that station. Some of the things that, again, I don't represent CTA, but some of the discussions we had at our meeting related to would be CTA be interested in allowing a local municipality pay for or participate in the operation of a station. Typically, they have not done that because of their existing labor agreements. It affects their FTEs for their employees and everything. But these are all things under CTA they're looking at, because as dollars are more scarce, they're looking for more innovative ways to operate and maintain facilities. There's no definitive answer for that right now.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. The next steps to take it from a feasibility study, again, is to continue the discussion with the Chicago Metropolitan Association of Planning, the RTA, CTA, and PACE, that this is a continuing priority of the city, and that the city will continue to look for sources of funds to go through the next phases. Again, advancing the project through the state and federal representatives. Identify the state and federal funding sources for phase 2 and 3 if they're applicable in this case. I should also mention that, again, depending on how CTA packages its funding for whatever it's doing in the future, that can impact a station here too, because obviously the CTA maintains the existing yellow line. Then perhaps the one item that the city has the most control over is local project financing, either through some type of public-private partnership or a special district or TIF area. And the reason that you would look for these TIF districts or a special district or other is mainly because you need to offset your federal share, which may require up 20% or more to go through these steps of that total cost.
Thank you very much. We have questions? Alderman Rainey.
Well, I want to make sure before the presentation is over that I take the opportunity to thank Linda O'Dwyer from St. Francis Hospital, who, as you know, had a very close interest in the Ridge Avenue stop, but the committee was committed to the whole concept of the feasibility study, and the most feasible stop was not Ridge Avenue, unfortunately, for St. Francis, but and also Ben Shapiro, who is South Evanston resident, and Tom Kepler. And I really appreciate their coming to the meetings and being a part of the advisory committee with Alderman Nguyen and myself. Also, Sue Gutterly and Eric Palmer, who and all the other members of the staff, Rajiv and Tom and Paul Schneider, who left us right at the end. So that was unfortunate. But anyway, going forward, before I make a motion to accept this, I just want to say that at this point in time, we're right on the brink of finding out. We know the train doesn't stop. We know ridership is there. I think what we're really asking is to accept the report and allow us to take the next step, which is really seeking out funding and support from other agencies. So with that, I'm going to move acceptance of this report.
Second. It's been moved and seconded to accept the report, and seeing no further lights on for discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The report is accepted. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And Madam Mayor, members of the council, our final report this evening is a discussion regarding the construction of a new replacement salt dome and storage facility. It's been a while since we've been here before you. Suzette Robinson is here with, we hope, is a final solution to our salt dome issue.
Good evening again, Madam Mayor, City Council, City Clerk, and City Manager. Suzette Robinson, Director of Public Works. And as you can see from the date on the slide, that was the last time that I was here, May 26, 2011, with some options that I must say left you guys in stunned silence. Very
cold.
So I think that was really the first time there was no reaction. So basically, but to go back to the drawing board. So what we did was we went back to take a look at, okay, what else can we do? And then we also had quite a few operational changes that occurred that allowed us to consider another option that we had previously dismissed. And that is the basis of the recommendation that I have this evening. This is the existing salt dome location at the Municipal Service Center. And then that's the photo of the same location. And what we were trying to accomplish was to establish a salt dome that met the following requirements. That the established budget that we had was $510,000. We wanted to store 4,000 tons of salt, and that number stemmed from a couple of things. The main thing, we wanted to make sure we had enough additional surplus capacity to get us through, especially if we had a very bad winter, which has happened twice, in that we couldn't get access to salt. So making sure we had enough to kind of tide us over if we get into a situation. The salt all arrives by barge, the surplus salt. So when the barges can't get through in the winter, if the river freezes over, that creates a problem for us being able to get access. And that's happened twice in the last 10 years. So we really wanted to make sure that we have more flexibility in access. So that's where the 4,000-ton minimum, and we use on average between 5,000 and 8,000 tons of salt a year. And the 4,000-ton capacity was really what we've seen most of the cities our size that tend to be the capacity that they were shooting for in response to that same issue, I might add. So the other thing, we also looked at two styles of domes, the gambrel style, which was more like a barn house-looking facade, and then the traditional dome that you see adjacent to the highways. And then we had a preference for the gambrel style. And then we also wanted to make sure we had salt brine operations, which is using the rock salt to create a liquid that we spray on the road for anti-icing. And then we also can mix it with geomelt to do de-icing as well. So we also need we need some additional covered storage space, and some of that has to do with recognizing the fact that we may not have that space available to us from the recycling center. So we tried to encompass all of these things in our requirement for a salt dome. And so after reevaluating everything, we are recommending that we build a salt dome exactly where we have one, demolish the existing one. It meets the budget requirements. It's 250 tons less. The capacity will be less than what we originally had asked for, but we believe that will be okay because we've expanded anti-icing and the use of the salt brine, which we spray. If you've seen the white stripes on some of the road, the dried up salt in advance of the storm, which really reduces the amount of rock salt that we have to put on the roadways. So for the last 2 years, we have been working with the Winnetka Public Works, and they have provided that rock salt to us in exchange for use of a garbage truck. So we kind of bartered the last couple of years to and they allowed us and provided the salt brine to us in exchange for the use of their garbage truck for special pickup days a couple of times a year. So that allowed us to really get a look at how the material would work for us. And we've already saw a decline. Even in spite of having a blizzard, the amount of salt that we used that year compared with 2008 when we had just about the same amount of snow, but it happened over several incidents, and we used much less salt, to the tune of 3,000 tons less, as a result of using the salt brine, and also this past year we also used geomelt and tried to use some of the super mixtures for de-icing. So once we have the material the equipment to produce that ourselves with the new salt dome, we believe that we can use less salt and it will not need the 4,000-ton capacity. And then also in terms of equipment, we have purchased new equipment that also has the ability to spray the rock salt with this material as it spreads the salt on the street. And then we also have as a part of the fleet plan, to purchase an actual sprayer. We have 2 smaller ones, but this one will be a larger one, and we can basically take care of the entire city for anti-icing and de-icing, which would really be great, and it's actually a greener thing because we'll use less rock salt. So basically, what we're recommending is the dome style to replace the existing, which is basically the picture that we have here. It'll be a little bigger than the one that you see there. And so we're asking for approval to continue to design the site. And after selecting the dome is actually, I call it a building in a box. They actually we do all the site layout and the pad. And the building, the dome building itself, that design, the manufacturer of the building just basically sells the building, and they do all the design. So we would just come back to you with a quote based on that type of design after we do the site preparation, and then we could have the salt dome constructed in the late spring of next year, because right now, because we had such a mild winter, we have a completely full salt dome, which was exactly not what I intended to have happen, so we could actually construct the dome. So now, since our dome is full and bursting in capacity, and so we want to wait to use that salt that we have, and then either work with a contractor to store our salt purchase for next year at their site, so we can construct the dome and then fill it, because we like to start the season with the full dome, so that by the time fall would get here, we would have a new salt dome and completely filled with salt. So that is the end of my presentation. Well,
thank you very much. Are there any questions? You want us to make a motion to do this? Alderman Rainey.
Madam Mayor, I move that we accept Ms. Robinson's report and recommend that she move forward getting the bid for the price of the dome.
Second. I would second
as she's presented it.
It's been moved and seconded. I think it's an excellent solution to a difficult problem. And seeing no lights on for further discussion, I guess it's a money issue. City Clerk, could you call the roll?
Alderman Grover.
Aye.
No, it's not.
It's not a money issue yet.
No.
It's still
Oh.
She's got to bring back the money.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Alderman Grover voted twice, but that's okay. Go for it. And opposed?
10-0.
Congratulations, Director Robinson.
And then I have one more thing that I'm passing out at the. Oh, this is a good thing.
Oh.
This is a good thing.
Now more pictures of snow.
No, I mentioned it before that we have a full salt dome because we had such a mild winter. And so what you see here is what our projected savings are as a result of having such a mild winter. And I will say that this is all based on having a very mild December 2012. So I know I have to always say that just in case. So as you can see, I did a comparison comparing fiscal years. Last year, we had some savings as a result of the season last year because we only had a 10-month. So we actually started after the blizzard, and then we had a mild December. So we had just under $200,000 in savings. And then as a result of this year so far, we have just about $370,000 in savings as well. You need more? Sorry, I have more.
You need some for the press. We'll get them copies before.
No, I have more copies. So sorry. So anyway, in addition to the snow, most people pay attention to the amount of snow. You know, we got 16 inches. On average, we get about 38 inches of snow in the area. For the last 5 years, we had higher than average snowfalls. So we got 16 inches, but what we pay attention to, too, is the number of snow and ice-related incidents, because even though we don't have the accumulated snow, we may get freezing rain. Those are the types of events that cause us to have to respond, which results in overtime. It may be, a small staff response, a 5 or 6 to just take care of an anti-icing, do a light salting scenario. And in comparison, for the 2010-11 snow season, we had 53 snow and ice-related incidents. In this past snow season, we only had 24. So roughly half, and we saved about just a little over half the money. So as a result, I would like to buy, no, I'm just kidding.
Nice try. Excellent work, Director Robinson. All right, City Manager, does that conclude all your special orders of business?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a motion to adjourn? City Clerk? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank heaven, no need to call on Alderman Wilson tonight.
Delivering a student.